there, and this is Tom Vitale. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us and to do this exclusive interview for Au Pair Weekend, Arts and Entertainment online program, and for all the au pairs. Thank you so much and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So just to introduce Tom to everybody, Tom Vitale has been working in television since 2002. Over more than a decade, Tom directed and produced over 100 episodes of TV with internationally known chef and TV host Anthony Bourdain. His work with Bourdain earned him 5 Emmy wins and the prestigious Peabody Award, which honors the most enlightening and invigorating stories in media. His work with Bourdain included several TV shows about travel, food, and culture. These shows include No Reservations and The Layover, both of which aired on the Travel Channel, and Parts Unknown on CNN. Vitale has traveled to roughly 70 countries, and a highlight from his career includes filming with President Obama in 2016 in Hanoi, Vietnam. Tom's work with Bourdain came to an abrupt end in 2018 when Bourdain unexpectedly passed away. So Tom, I'd like to start with a question from an au pair. There were many au pairs who submitted questions for this interview, so thank you to all of you who did that. This is from Aranza from Mexico. Why did you make the decision to select your career in the arts?
It seemed a bit easier than having a real job. In all seriousness, though, it's a fun job. It's always something different. It's been a real great ride.
And this question is from Anna from Germany. Were you scared to start working in the arts and entertainment industry, especially since you stated that on paper you seemed like an unlikely candidate? How did you overcome that fear?
I was an unlikely candidate for a lot of the travel, I think, because I'm terrified of flying. I also, though, would say I might have been more scared of the thought of a job where I sat at a desk from 9 to 5 every day for my whole life. I'd say that would be scarier than getting on a small Amazonian bush plane and flying off into a terrible thunderstorm. I love doing that.
So you're saying that even though you haven't overcome your fear of flying, what you just described that actually happened to you sounds less scary than a regular 9 to 5 office job?
That does sound a little weird, but yes, that is what I'm saying. Yeah, yes.
Well, then it makes perfect sense why you found yourself in this career and involved in the arts.
I would say one thing about flying. You cannot let fear get in the way of an adventure or a good time. So that's how I would get through it. Whatever was on the other end of that terrifying flight was going to be an adventure and a good experience. So, plus Tony also said, "Come on, you're never going to die in a plane crash. It won't be that glamorous. You'll probably slip in your bathtub," which was also kind of reassuring.
Darkly reassuring, I guess. So this is a question, Jana Marie from Germany and Sonia from South Africa both had a similar question, which was, what inspired you to become a director? And then also, how did you feel after your first successful project? So maybe starting with the first part. I know there's many different roles and jobs within the arts entertainment industry, including the TV industry. So what specifically about directing was most or is most interesting to you?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I've always liked storytelling. That's kind of been very gratifying for me. And so, as the director, it's your responsibility to put all the pieces together, and ultimately, so when you fail, it's your fault. But also, when there's success, that's your success in a lot of ways because you again put all the pieces together. It takes so many people to put together a TV show. It's very collaborative type of work, but ultimately it's very gratifying to sort of tell a story. And as other roles in the business, you kind of do your piece and hand it off. But as the director, you're involved in almost all parts, everything from or at least in the work that I did, from the pre-production planning to the shoots to overseeing and working very closely with the editors. So yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
great.
And
You get to again have your hands in many different pots, which is good for me because I have some ADD issues.
and how did you feel after your first successful directing project? And what do you consider to be that?
I think I guess that relates a little bit back to what I said before, in that I guess I would consider that it's an incredibly invigorating and wonderful feeling to, have told a story that hopefully was interesting or entertaining to other people. My first successful directing job. I mean, it was I think the first episode I directed, which is kind of a bad example because it's not really what the show did best or what we did best. Uh, but there were issues out of our control. But at the end of the day, it still was entertaining despite causing a touch of damage, which I still feel bad about. But anyway, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Any chef will tell you that.
And what would you describe as a high point in your professional career?
Well, in your very impressive sounding introduction, uh, filming with President Obama was definitely pretty cool, pretty terrifying, but pretty amazing. He seemed so down to earth and wonderful. Um, and in the sort of thousands of scenes I filmed over the years, maybe only 4 or 5 times did anybody sitting across the table from Tony ever up at the crew and ask, "Did you guys eat? I feel bad here having all this good food while you're there standing working." And he did that right away. So whether or not that was politics or just him, it was a very nice gesture.
Yes. And it sounds like directing the types of shows you directed are very complicated and have lots of logistical challenges, anyways. But I can only imagine that filming the current standing president um, in a different country would also be extremely complicated and challenging. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that consisted of?
Yes, we should come back though, actually, to the other part, and I can explain because I think the type of directing I did maybe it was very specific, um, to the genre. But there are, like you said, many moving pieces always. Um, it's sort of like a whole new playbook for each country we landed in, whole new local crew, different customs, rituals, rhythms, making them all work and figuring that out. Yes, lots of challenges. Then when you add the president into that, the fact that it had to be a top secret thing or it wasn't going to happen, which was hard because Vietnam is one of the countries where you have in communist countries, you have a government minder who is supposed to go with you and monitor everything you do to make sure you're not going to make Vietnam look bad. So we had to keep it a secret from the minder and the whole local crew. Then, in addition to that, there was the topic of the venue for filming. Of course, the Secret Service, which does a very good job of protecting the president and with a very large footprint, generally wanted us to film in a sort of more banquet room type environment, which seemed very sterile and was not at all what we sort of do. But we were able to convince them, we got, I think, very lucky, convincing them to take what was at the time, even for me, kind of a terrifying risk, filming in the restaurant we did because it was in Hanoi's old quarter, which, is almost sort of impossible to control in the first place. On top of that, we were up on the second floor of the restaurant above the kitchen, only one way in or out. And, there were all of these walks with like flames going everywhere. The place is a fire trap. Um, and the room was so small that there wasn't even room for any of the Secret Service to be in there. There was just the one head guy sort of standing in the door. And so they, I guess, had a lot of trust for us. And, there was a lot involved with that, definitely. But his team was fantastic. We worked most closely with the sort of media department there, and yeah, it was a very cool experience. We got a picture with him at the end, which for me was the one thing I was really hoping for. After we finished filming, he stayed, and he must had to stand in for 25 pictures with different people, which I guess if you're the president, you're sort of used to doing. But he was very gracious that way. He gave us surprisingly large amount of time on a very quick trip.
Thank you. How would you describe Anthony Bourdain, and what was it like to work with him?
Um, Tony was a very funny person, um, all the time. He used to say, even in the worst moments, there was always a good joke. He would say, "If you can't laugh, there's nothing left to do but cry." And I'd say he was wickedly funny and witty. That would be one of my sort of favorite parts of him. Because again, even when you were getting chewed out, he would do it with such creativity. um, that it actually made it entertaining. And what was he like to work with? He was a very interesting person to work with. He was very low maintenance in a lot of ways. You know, there was no trailer, like he didn't ask for much in the way of creature comfort um, at all. You know, was that Jennifer Lopez no red M&Ms or blue M&Ms joke? He was maybe the opposite of that. However, it was very challenging because Tony had very high standards, as I think we all did, which was, you know, sort of self-imposed in a lot of ways. And letting him down, um, you know, kind of letting down the home team or the place, or not doing our best, that was very sort of stressful. And he wanted us to all give our best all the time, which can be a bit exhausting. But you know, I mean, that's why we were there. It certainly wasn't a vacation.
And this is a question that was probably the most popular that the au pairs ask. So many au pairs ask this. Alina, Darlene, Stephanie, for example. So of all the places you visited, what is your favorite? And what would you say is a must-see location?
Yeah, well, that is an interesting question. There's sort of two answers. A simpler answer might be, I'd say Iran was one of the most amazing trips that I went on. The generosity and kindness of the people was so unbelievable, and it was also such a surprise given what you know, I guess maybe the mainstream news media might have you believe. Uh, you know, I think in the TV show 24, they portrayed Tehran as having dust-covered roads and, you know, like sheep walking through. I mean, Tehran was a very sophisticated modern metropolis, um, you know, and the Iranians also, the Persians, Iranians, um, were very good at differentiating between people and their governments, which was something that was really wonderful. So they didn't see us as, you know, any kind of enemy, or Americans. If America is the enemy, they just saw us as people. In fact, even when we went to go film at, I believe it was the anniversary of death of Ayatollah Khomeini, um, you know, the cameras came by, and so like all the people that were there, they know what to do. They put the signs chanting "Death to America, Death to America," and then after they get the shot, they put them down, and we're so curious to hear about what America was like and ask us what our favorite movies were.
Wow,
And
that's really interesting.
yeah, and because they're not allowed certain bits of officially not allowed certain bits of Western culture, they sort of fetishize them to some kind of degree. So there's a big kind of black market there for, you know, Western or American music or movies. Um, I think that so we asked the question, well, what's your favorite movie? And I think Titanic was the answer. These are women again in a full abaya who had just been chanting "Death to America," And it's clearly something of a show. At least it was with the people we met.
Yeah, you must have been able to access and experience cultures in a lot of different ways because of your travels and also the way that your show prioritized learning about culture and food rather than necessarily following what you kind of referred to as the mainstream media approach.
Well, yeah. So speaking of that, I mean, the show we just had amazing access, and it would take about 9 to 12 days to make an episode, and in the time that we were there, we would have, I guess, sort of the experiences that it would take an average visitor 3 months maybe. And that was so much based on our connections with the local fixers and producers that we would hire, and the access they gave us. So we kind of never went anywhere cold. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we kind of had already, through that and through the local crew we would hire, everyone from the drivers, to PAs, camera assistants, and the fixers. Like, we already had kind of a lot of friends. Um, so and friends tell you what the real good stuff is and take you places. So that was really wonderful. So as far as a favorite kind of place, it had so much to do with the people, more so than you know the big tourist attraction. Of course, a stunning waterfall or beautiful beach vista is a nice thing to stumble upon, and it's a nice shot to have at the show. But that kind of thing would never be a destination for us. Um, so yeah, I mean, with the exception, there are certain places where, I mean, Colombia is another example of a country that was just so unbelievably friendly and welcoming, and we had such a good time. And it's really, for me, it's all about the people, and so often you won't find that out or know that until you actually get there. Um, so I know that's perhaps not the most satisfying answer. So I guess maybe the best piece of advice I could give would be to not chase postcards, if that makes sense.
And I think you're talking to the right group here because everybody has decided instead of traveling to move somewhere and be a part of the culture and understands the importance of really getting to know the people and having a relationship with the people, and that's how you learn about a culture. So I'm sure that the
That's a,
open listening to this understand exactly what you mean.
I mean, actually a fantastic point. Um, you know, it's even when it's bad, then you learn, oh well, I don't like that, or that's not good. But it is, as I'm sure you guys all know, totally different experience when you go there and you have a host family who's going to give you some advice, show you around, have you meet their friends, rather than just sort of getting on a tour bus and being taken from one site to another.
Yeah. So you mentioned learning a lot about different people and different cultures in your travels, but something else that's so amazing about traveling is you actually learn a lot about yourself. So my question to you is what did you learn about yourself with all of your international travel experience?
That is a hard question. I learned my fear of flying never went away. I was sort of hoping it would. Everyone's like, "Oh no, you just fly some more and you won't be scared." But no, so every time still, I don't understand how airplanes stay in the sky. Only have 100,000 different moving mechanical pieces that all have to act in perfect harmony with each other to keep the plane from malfunctioning, let alone the physics of 20 tons of metal in the sky moving at those speeds. I don't like flying, but um, I always knew that, so I didn't need to travel to teach me that. What did I learn about myself? I think that the travel, it's very humbling in a lot of ways. When you go places, maybe in particular, that can be very poor, or have a lot of sort of bad stuff going on politically, and still people can be incredibly generous and are very generous. In fact, that was 9.5 times out of 10 the experience. I think a big part of that had to do with the fact that we came, with as much of an open mind as possible, which is always very important when you're traveling. Um, uh, Nothing against going to an all-inclusive, resort beach and just sitting on the beach for a week. I mean, everyone sort of needs that maybe at some point, because fully immersive travel is not relaxing at all, but it really is very sort of eye-opening. And I think I've learned, just how, the world can be scary. The world can be also so beautiful, and people, you know, can also be scary, but there are so many wonderful people, um, and just a real appreciation of the kind of kindness and generosity that, we were shown was very, it just gave me, I'd say, a better appreciation of other people. Um, I learned, I guess, about myself. Uh, Yeah, I guess I learned that. I did learn how important the rule of law is in a certain way. Like, the rule of law is not the right word, but like an organized society,
Mm.
because I've been to places where there is just complete chaos, and I did not have an appreciation for how awful that could be. Um, you know, I think maybe in my college days, the idea of anarchy was somewhat romantic. In practice, I have found it to be less so.
Thank you. This question is from Sine from South Africa. Her question is why do you think art is so important in today's society?
It's a very good question. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. There are probably lots of other people who know more about that specifically. Um, but I mean, I think art, I guess, is in general always very important, both good art and bad art. If there's, you can even make judgments. I mean, there's the pure sort of entertainment value and escapism, which people need sometimes. But art, I mean, for us, it was always sort of a space to, make something entertaining and work kind of a bit of a subversive message into our program. And by subversive, I mean just a little bit against, the kind of mainstream. I mean, as I mentioned before about Iran, um, it's almost like if you were watching CNN, it would seem like their coverage might be contradictory because the news piece would make Iran look extremely different than our show did. And not to say that there aren't issues there. I mean, it's very complicated again, but there's a lot more to the story than you get from just news. Um, I don't know if I would even call what we did art. Um, we tried to make it look pretty. We always thought of ourselves more like craftsmen than artists in a certain way. Um, doing our best that we could, with certain materials, I suppose. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. This question is from Rowena from Germany. In the creator sector of jobs in these times, I often hear from exhausted creators who are talking about pressure that is on them regarding their creativity in the fast moving world. Did you have some difficulties when it came to time pressure and creative ideas? If so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, well, I think, it's kind of a universal question in a certain way, or answer. Everyone in every field, I'm sure, suffers from time pressure. I guess specifically, there's a fear that you have to create something and it has to be good in a short period of time, and that can be very stressful. But I'd say the job in general is kind of, it attracts, or people who thrive in high stress situations usually do well, um, in in creative jobs like that, or at least in kind of job that I had. Not all creative jobs, I'm sure, are quite so extreme when it came to time pressure and stress. Like if you miss that shot, you're not going to get it again because we're about to fly halfway back around the world. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and there are some ups and downs and failures and successes, but it kind of evens out. It is in general media, at least TV, the kind I worked in, can be very all consuming and exhausting, but also gratifying, which makes it hopefully all worth it at the end of the day.
Thank you. And do you have any tips for someone trying to turn their arts and entertainment related passions or hobbies or interests into an actual career?
I do actually. There's this saying that every paid job comes from a free one, and I've certainly found that to be true. The summer of my junior year of college, I I worked as a production assistant on independent film that was being made, and that was an unpaid job, but I worked really hard at it. And then when I graduated, I sent out an email to everyone who I knew who worked in the industry, and which was not many people at all. And the gentleman who had been making the film that I'd worked on gave me a job as a tape logger, my very first job, which was right after school. And I think that there's so much truth to that, because if you're volunteering, doing a volunteered sort of unpaid job, I mean, first of all, you learn a lot about yourself if you like that job or that work. And then if you do it like you are getting paid and don't complain, that leaves a really good impression on people. And it's also a great way to make connections, because in the media world, you know, um, there's another saying that it's something about who you know. And there's more to it than the saying, because I think, you still have to have some kind of talent and desire to do it, but who you know is very important, because these things often happen so fast and quickly, and if you know somebody, you're kind of a trusted or known quantity. And yeah, so my advice would be to volunteer um, on some projects in whatever particular, if it's film or television. And a good way to do that is oftentimes at graduate schools, like here in New York. We have a bunch of film schools. But Tisch, for instance, when people are students rather are in their final year and doing their thesis film, they would put up postings looking for basically production assistants, PAs, which again is unpaid work, but that's a good way of probably meeting some pretty talented people who will shortly be working in the industry. And then they're great people who then owe you, at the very least, some good advice about how to go about actually starting your career. And then once things start and you get to know people, it's sort of like a snowball. It gets easier. Starting is can be very challenging. Um, yeah. So work for free if you somehow have the ability to do that, and treat it like a real job, not treat it like you are being paid, and give it your all, and you'll both learn if you like it, and if you do well at it, you'll probably have a good chance of getting your foot in the door in exchange.
Thank you. And just for fun, if you weren't involved in the arts entertainment at all, industry at all, or in a parallel universe, what else would you be doing with your career? What would be
Wow.
your dream job in a different reality, I guess?
Oh, um, I am personally. I think I love historic architecture, and preserving and saving it would maybe be something I could be very passionate about. I think that also, though, that sort of comes back to storytelling a little bit, because I think that buildings and sort of man-made landscapes, like a city, it's bigger than just a building sometimes, but a neighborhood or a street. I mean, they really tell a fantastic, fascinating story as well. And yeah, I wish that there was a little more, let's say, appreciation for craftsmanship of days gone by, because the people who made things, they're our ancestors, and I feel like destruction of them is sort of like destroying your grandfather's work.
And to finish off the interview, I told my 6-year-old that I was going to be interviewing you, and she was very excited and had a very important question to ask you. So, are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
You are ready? Okay, good. Do you have a Harry Potter cloak?
I do not.
Uh oh.
I do not have a cloak. I'm sorry, Cambria. I I never really liked the Harry Potter man.
Okay, that's a different interview for a different time, and she'll be disappointed, but we'll figure it out.
I bet I
It-
have something else magical though. I did bring with me a magic 8 ball.
okay, I will pass that along to her. And thank you so much for your time, Tom. It's
Oh,
always a
my
pleasure meeting
pleasure.
you.
Thank
And
you so much, and good luck to all you guys out there. And I hope you're having some fun and staying well in this crazy time. And I know it probably it's hard to be away from home, so yeah, hang in there.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye. You too.